All right, welcome back to the Forfeit Fatherhood podcast, a podcast for fathers by fathers, where we talk about the four pillars of fatherhood, which are faith, family, finance, and fitness. And I got another guest with me today, and I'm excited actually to talk to this brother because I had the privilege of being a guest on his podcast, and he's now returning the favor for me, and I'm excited for you guys to hear a little bit from him. Earnest James, what's going on, brother?
What's going on, man? What's going on? Glad to be here.
All right, deal to heal with E. James. What's happening? It's been a while, man. It's been almost a year, somewhere around there. It's been a long time since we.
It's been a little while.
Yeah. I'm seeing the growth. I'm seeing you doing things on social media, and you're like obviously a man after my own heart. We talk about fatherhood, so I like to see that things are progressing for you.
Yeah. It's been a long journey. Still working on some stuff. Being able to cross over now, even beside the podcast, into some other things that I'm able to do now. Got some ebooks out and some things like that. But yeah, man, just plugging away at it, and always glad to be able to connect with guys like yourself. First of all, guys who I've had on that's been a guest on my platform, to be able to then in return be a guest on their platform. I'm always blessed to be able to do that, because that was one of the things that I was able to do even when I started my podcast. But before I ever started a podcast, the way I got into podcasting was someone asked me to be a guest. And I ended up doing about 6 or 7 episodes on different podcasts before I started mine. And then once I started mine, I've been able to reach out to several of the people who I was on their podcast and have them up as guests on my podcast. So I love that, to be able to do that. And so the same thing with you. You know, you came on, was a guest on my platform. And so I'm definitely honored to, be able to be a guest on your platform as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. As we mentioned your podcast, can you tell us a little bit about your podcast? What's the topic there?
So the name of the podcast is Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, right? So my mission is to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. To deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. And so that was the premise of the podcast, And so on the podcast, my guest and I talk about different topics and discussion and ways to help us heal in every area of our life. I definitely started it with my own journey and being able to share my viewpoint for the things that I've been through. But I would say I haven't been through everything, and neither do I want to go through everything. So for the people that have the people that's going through something that I haven't experienced, then I'm able to reach out to people like yourself and other coaches and authors and things like that to address those issues. And not only to address it, but bring some kind of solution to whatever that person, that listener that's tuning in for some kind of healing in whatever area that is, to bring some kind of solution to that, or if not a solution, at least some help to lead them in the right direction. And so that's the premise of the podcast. I just come on and I talk to different ones, and we try to bring solutions, to the issues that we've overcome, but someone else may still be dealing with.
Got you. Okay. All right, cool. All right. Well, so this is, being a fatherhood podcast. You're obviously a father. How many kids you got?
5 kids altogether. 1 biological, which is my daughter. She's the youngest, and she just made 19 this year. So my baby's not a baby no more. And so I have 4 stepsons who are all older than my daughter. The oldest is in his 20s, and then it just kind of goes down from there until my daughter, like I said, who's the youngest, who's 19. So it's a little a range of years in between that. But yeah, being a dad, a girl dad, like yourself also, but then also being a stepdad, that's a whole nother dynamic. But it's all a part of fatherhood, and being that example, to your kids and to those kids who you come in contact with, not necessarily being, and I always say when I talk about fatherhood, I don't necessarily like to just say father. I would say father figure, because it's so much more, to being a father than just to you taking out time with your child. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of people in general, because even some adults still need guidance, and so there's a lot of people who didn't have fathers, and so father figures, it goes way beyond just your relationship with your own children, and so I always like to say, father figure,
Yeah, I agree. I've been kind of the mind of telling people a lot recently, because of some things on social media. It's like I posted some stuff on my Instagram that kind of took off, and there's been a lot of comments on it. But there's the struggle with a lot of people, the absentee father kind of thing, where I didn't have my father around, or single mothers having to raise their sons and daughters by themselves. And I keep pointing out that being fathered isn't always biological. You can definitely be fathered by a stepfather. You can be fathered by a coach. You can be fathered by somebody in the community, a pastor, a leader, a mentor. Fathering isn't just about who gave the DNA to bring you life, although that is your biological father. But there's so much more to it. There's so much more to the process of becoming a man, and becoming a woman, that is bigger than just the biological piece. Even if you have a really present and available and purposeful and intentful father in your life, that is your biological father, there are still other male influences that you'll get, that will help mold you into who you are. And so it's really important to not ignore those, and not to, feel helpless, like you don't, like you're fatherless completely, right? You just may be missing that biological piece.
And I think it's a process of learning, right? Of learning and teaching, because like you said, we focus so much on the father, or absent father, and my father wasn't there as connected to the biological part of it. You know what I'm saying? And so, but like you said, that's why I always say father figure, because it's so much broader than that. There are people who have never met their biological fathers, but yet were men in their lives who stepped in to raise them and to be that influence that they needed, and that to take that space, to stand in that space. And so, it doesn't always have to be your biological father. And sometimes it's unfortunate that it won't be. And sometimes not even no fault to their own. I definitely know some people who fathers passed away, and so it wasn't like he wasn't there because he didn't want to be, it just he couldn't because of the situation. And so where does that leave you now? But I think also when I talk to mothers is that as a mother, you can't be mother and father. You hear that, oh, I'm playing both roles. Yeah, you can't play both roles, because number one, you weren't designed to play both roles. You know what I mean? There are some roles that you may have had to pick up because of, the lack of, the father being involved or whatever. But even with that, it's your responsibility to make sure that there are father figures in the lives of your children. You know what I mean? And so I always tell them 3 things to look for. Look for someone that's already doing the job, right? And so what I mean by that is someone who's already leading, whether it's a teacher, a principal, pastor, a mentor, somebody that's already in that position to be a father figure to others, right? And there's plenty of us out here, and so then not only that, but then look for someone who has the characteristics that you want to be instilled in your child, whether it's son or a daughter, you know what I mean? Because I always say there are a lot of people that will lead, but you want to make sure they're leading in the right direction, because there are, guys on the corner that'll take your son under their wing, but I don't think you want your son to go where they might be trying to lead him. You know what I mean? And so finding someone who's already in position to lead, someone who's have the characteristic that you want to be installed in your child, and then the last one, someone who wants the job. So because that's a dynamic too. There are guys who volunteer, like, hey, I'm a mentor. I want your children, a coach, I want your children. I want to be that person who installs, these values in your kids. But then there are some who may have the qualifications to do it, but they're not necessarily want to be that person, And so if it's a person that don't want the position, you kind of can't force it on them because it's not going to have the desired effect. But like I said, there's plenty of organizations, of mentors, of podcasts and things like like this, where you can find those positive role models to be able to pour into your kids. And so as a mother, like I said, I know that there are some roles you may have to pick up, but there's also some roles that you can share just by reaching out to the positive role models that's around all of us, is out there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I told a mom the other day that it's, she's like, yeah, I'm playing both, I'm father and mother. And I'm like, yeah, I applaud you, because that's a tough gig for anybody. But it's like basketball, right? Like the defense is going to move. And sometimes I might have to cover, I'm a guard, but sometimes I got to cover the center. That don't make me a center though. Like
Right.
I still need to play my guard position. Like just because I had to do it and I did it successfully doesn't mean that you should. And it doesn't mean that like we necessarily should beat our chest and like promote the fact that, because it kind of perpetuates the idea that fathers aren't needed. And we all can agree that they are. Even in the fact that you felt like you had to pull double duty. If fathers weren't needed, then there would be no double duty. You would just be you.
Right.
And so it's really important to those things that you just mentioned are really important. Even especially the intentional one, because women are like, I got my brother is going to be the father figure in his life, or my father. Your father he's a grandfather now. He ain't necessarily trying to be the father for little 6-year-old Jerome, like he was when you was a kid. Or your brother is in his 20s. He's going out living his life. He's maybe not showing him the things or her the things that you want modeled for your child, right? Just because they're a male figure doesn't mean they're the right male figure. So it definitely is going to require doing your homework, that's for sure. But they are out there, and there is definitely a need for it. There's no way around it, male or female. No matter whether you have a son or a daughter, they both need male influence.
Yeah, I just going back to what you just said, even with the brothers, I was talking to a friend of mine not too long ago who has a couple brothers. And we were talking about her son, who's now in like his early 20s, and just having a conversation of where he is and, where he's trying to go, and those influences that he need in his life, And so I asked, I said, well, I know you got brothers. I know you got a father, like, nobody's stepping up to that position. And she was like, no, like they don't want to, and so that's what I mean by, so you got to connect with someone who wants the job, because even those that are in position to be a father figure may not want to be one, so whether they are grandfather or uncle, they just might want to just stay in that grandfather and uncle role, show up on holidays and, things like that, but not necessarily be as involved as they could be, and so it's just finding those men that, what, you might not be blood, you might not be biological, but you want the job to pour into my child and to give him the necessary father mentoring that he needs. But we just got to find it. But it's out there. And that's why I like to just really always say it's out there. We don't have to do it alone. You know what I'm saying? The women don't have to do it alone. Even as men, we don't have to do it alone, because a lot of times just trying to be a father or a father figure, and a lot of us, not necessarily myself, but a lot of guys that I know were raised without their father. And so now they're trying to be fathers and father figures to other young men, but there's still a place inside of them that is empty that we have to glean from each other as fathers, when we come together as fatherhood and brothers, and be able to have our own discussions and bring healing to ourselves that way, when we step out to be father figures and mentors and coaches to the next generation of young men, we're coming from a place of healing ourselves, and so it's a circle, it's a round circle, and we all got to play our part. But I definitely know 100% that we are here. It's not hard to find. You know what I'm saying? We're all just like there's negativity everywhere. There's positive men that's willing to step up in the lives of your children and even in the lives of each other. And that's why one of the reasons I love what we're doing now as two men having a conversation, because a lot of times we don't have that safety net within our circles, and we have to build it. We have to develop it, by being the one to tell our friends, hey, you can talk to me. We can have these discussions. You ain't got to be tough. You know what I'm saying? Because I know life beats all of us up. And so you don't have to always present yourself to me as like you got it all together and everything is going good, because I'm a man just like you are. And so I know I'm dealing with the same pressures that you're dealing with, but we have to cultivate those rooms and those spaces for us to be vulnerable with one another,
Yeah. I mean, I can't disagree with that at all, man. You're right on. These conversations are extremely important because I do think fathers kind of, just as men in general, one, we think asking for help or looking for help is weak. And so we try to like find our way on our own. But the reality is just like anything else. Like when we don't know how to fix the sink, we'll hop on YouTube and find somebody that can teach us how to do it. It's the same thing, right? We don't know how to answer that question or solve that issue that's going on in our family. Reach out to somebody who has experienced it or might be going through it right now and just a step ahead of you. And they can kind of tell you, hey, this is what I did. This is what I did. Don't do that. Can tell you the pitfalls to avoid. And hopefully, if somebody's listening to this podcast, they're not one of those guys. But I know we all struggle with it from time to time, right? Like you may be listening to the podcast because you're open to the opportunity, but then at the same time, still a little gun shy about actually reaching out, because in your community, right? In your community, there's groups of men. There's mentors, there's coaches that you could be reaching out to. I'm not saying don't listen to the podcast, obviously, but I mean, some situations are a little bit more intensive and needs more of a hands-on approach, right? I got a question for you though, because I obviously haven't gone through this, but I had my whole, I guess from the time I was 5 to the time I was 17, my mother was married, so I had a stepfather, and I know. In my experience, I can't say that I know any other way. I know in my experience, as the child in that relationship. But what is it like being? And I've actually talked to my own father about this because I have 2 sisters that are not his, but whatever. I'm asking, what is that like to be first to step into it at the beginning, right? We take us back to the beginning of what it is to take on that responsibility of being a stepfather.
Well, one of the things that I told my sons in the door, when I came was, I'm not trying to take your father's space, right? I'm not trying to take his place, but I will stand in the gap until he shows up. You know what I mean? So their father was around, but not necessarily there, like literally probably 30 minutes away from where we live, So always, the door was always open. I remember this part was funny. When we first started dating, I was at the house, and this just happened. I was at my wife at the time's house, and we had just started dating, and I had my daughter with me. My daughter is the youngest. She was only like 6 or 7 at this time. And so I'm at the house, and then their father comes over. Her son's father comes over, and I'm in the back, right? So I wasn't in the front. So he came in, he's in the living room, and my daughter comes out. And so he's like, hey, he's talking to my daughter, and he's like, who is this? Whose child is this? Because they only had sons, right? So who's this? Where does the little girl come from? And so then I came out, and I'm like, hey, so we've known each other from beforehand, You know what I mean? So we weren't unfamiliar with each other. And so I came out and we started having the conversation. But that was the first example. But since then, there were times where all of us were together. So it's me, it's him, as my wife at the time, it's his wife at the time, where we're all together. And so that just goes back to that. I'm not trying to take your dad's place. Like that door is always open for whenever he's able to come around and to do whatever, the door is always open. But I will be here in the meantime. Right. And so that was one of the first things that I wanted to instill in the boys that, yeah, I'm going to be here. But when your father comes, so there were times where he would come over and he wanted to spend time with them and I would just disappear. You know what I mean? Like, because I didn't want it to be almost not necessarily a competition, but you know what I mean? I wanted to make sure he had all their full attention. You know what I mean? Because when he shows up, this is his time to be in their life. This is his time to show up the way that he's supposed to show up, And so I always made that known. But even with that, there still are some challenges as they get older. I came in a picture when my sons were really young, and so, of course, just like any child, once they start hitting the teenage years, then you start having some different challenges or whatever. But one of the things I always told them is I'm never going to say or do anything to hurt you. So even though you might not like what I say or you might not like, the direction that I'm leading you, from experience that at the end of it I have your best interest at heart, And so just building that relationship just on those principles, there are going to be times you're not going to like me and that's okay. And I'm okay with it. But I go back to like one of the things my dad would always say when we were growing up, he would always say, respect me and love your mother. And so I carry that same motto, especially with my sons. Like, yeah, because I know I'm not your biological father. So there's that, you know what I mean? And then you're not always going to like what I tell you to do. So there's that, you know what I mean? So you don't have to like it, but respect me, you know what I mean? And as long as we have that respect, then that's going to balance out because as you get older, you're going to realize, oh, okay, he did know what he was talking about. And okay, yeah, shouldn't have went that way. Or, those things, you'll start to figure those things out. But, in those teenage years when you're starting to figure out that or think, you know what I'm saying? That's where we always have those bump heads. But again, I think it's all with the relationship that you build, as a stepfather or just as a father figure, in general. Like, look, I love you and I'm never going to do anything to intentionally hurt you. And that has to be set up beforehand. So no matter when those hard times come and those disagreements come and those times come where we button heads at the end of the day, even though we're button heads, you still know that I love you and I got your best interest at heart, regardless whether we agree or not. And so I started building that foundation from day one, and so even now it's still the same. Of course, like I said, my daughter's the youngest, she's 19, so all my sons are older than that now. And, still trying to figure out, where they stand as young men, but it's still that same thing. Like, hey, I'm here for you. They're all now in the process of building a better relationship with their biological father. And I don't have a problem with that. That's what you're supposed to do, and so they don't lean on me as much now. And that's cool. And I tell them, but hey, just know that at the end of the day, if you need anything, you can call me. If anything happened, whatever, you got my number. Just pick up the phone and call me and I'm gonna be there for you. And I think once you build that foundation, then it'll work out in the end.
Yeah. I think the way that you approach it in the beginning is really important. It's really hard to go backwards and change things, right? Once you've set a precedent. So walking into it, I think I feel like you did it the right way, right? Obviously you guys have you've been a father figure in their life for this long. So it's worked out and it's always going to have its ups and downs. I think with me, with my stepdad, I was like 4 or 5, so probably too young to really remember if we had that conversation, if that conversation was had. And he was he wasn't really present. He was there, but he wasn't present, even in the household. And so I just really didn't have. It wasn't a bad relationship. I just didn't have a relationship. You know what I mean? It just wasn't. It wasn't there. You know what I mean? Like I don't remember a time where I was like I felt like I needed to go to him to talk about something, or I felt like if I was in trouble I was going to it was never that kind of thing. It was just like and it was at the same time it wasn't like, oh, that's just my mom's husband. It's really weird. Like, you know what I mean? It's somewhere in the middle there where I was just respectful enough that I had to call him dad, which wasn't weird to me because I was 4 when he came into my life. So I hadn't been whatever. So it wasn't weird until I got older. Right. And then like I started kind of wanting more from him as a man, as I was, in high school, dealing with sports and girls and these things. And my dad was back in my life at that time, but it was like still legal visitation. So I could only see him on every other weekend or a month here in the summer. And I was playing sports, so that affected it. And so I needed that dad to talk to, and he wasn't there or available. And so I had some resentment towards him during that time. I would say probably my junior, senior year. But other than that, I just really didn't have any feelings about it at all, which looking at it back now, I always say I need to go find him and talk to him because him and my mom split up when I went to college. And so I haven't talked to him since. So it's been almost 20 years. It has been 20 years. And so I still talk to his daughters, my sisters, but I haven't spoken to him, and I'm always like, I got to find him someday and talk to him before it's too late. Right. Cause he's getting old.
Yeah. I think you should do that because so in our own journeys, right. As men and growing, and I was having this conversation with my brother just on yesterday. Right. And so we don't really realize the part that we play, because we're just doing what we're supposed to do. Right. We're in the house, we're doing our responsibilities, whatever. So we don't always recognize the effect that we have on those who we love, And so that being said, sometimes those conversations need to be had. And I say this from a twofold, right? Especially as a stepdad, because there are times that no matter how much you love, you don't necessarily feel loved. You know what I mean? So even in the lives of my sons, no matter how much I pour out, there are times when it's like, man, I don't feel like it's appreciated, or I don't feel like it's reciprocated. You know what I mean? And so in the middle of it, you might not address it. You might, especially as a father, you got to keep going. You got to keep moving. But to have those conversations later, especially when they're older, and I've had these conversations with my sons now about, things that transpired and, what they didn't like, what they did like, and still being able to, now, especially as men, for them to say, I love you. You know what I mean? Like, okay, it wasn't all in vain. You know what I mean? Like they didn't express it then, but they express it more now. I appreciate you, and things like that, that I'm hearing now that I didn't hear, when they were growing up. And so even with having a conversation with my own father and, just being able to have a conversation with him about, us growing up and the trials and tribulations that we went through, and hearing some things from his point of view, like, yeah, we went through that as, let's just say, having lack. There was some times period where we didn't have everything that we needed. Well, from a child, you're like, oh man, dad didn't come through or mom didn't come through. Like, we need this and we don't have it. But then as a father, how does that make you feel? When you're doing your best, but you have to watch your children and knowing that they need something that you are not able to give them at that time. And to have these conversations years later, to hear it from my dad, and then for me to be able to reassure him, even in those time periods that, as a child, I may not have understood it, but as a father now, I understand what you were going through and I appreciate everything that you did. It's never too late to have those conversations, and even though it sometimes we as the child don't really recognize how essential that is as a father, to hear it from your child, that, hey, I appreciate what you did for me. I appreciate the sacrifices that you made, whether you felt like you were supposed to or whatever. I appreciate it and I love you for it. To have those conversations, it means the world. So I think from both sides, that you should do that, just to have the conversation with him, and maybe some things that he can shed light on, from his perspective, of maybe why y'all didn't have, the kind of relationship that you probably needed. And as a father now, you'll be able to see it more clearly and be able to have a relationship now that probably could be, even more meaningful now as a young father yourself than it probably was growing up, because you can see it from both lens. You can see it from the child perspective and you can see it from the father's perspective. And when you guys bring that together, I think that'd be really beneficial for you and for him. I think that should be a good conversation. You might well want to have him on, because I know I talked to my dad about coming on the podcast and us having a conversation. I think that's really needed for two reasons. And I don't mean to drag this out, but for two reasons, I think that's important. One is it's important to have the conversation, right? It's important to have the conversation. And then if you're able to get it on the podcast or record it, it's a conversation that never dies. There may come a time when one of you may not be able to reach out to the other, but you can always go back to that conversation that you had and pull from it. That, despite what we're going through right now, at this time we had this conversation, so I know how much I meant to him. I know how, I was able to express to him how much he meant to me. You know what I'm saying? And I think that having those conversations, it lives on, and not just for yourself, but even for your kids. You know what I mean? Because I know there are, matter of fact, my sons, their father's father was killed when he was young. So they never knew their grandfather, right? And so to be able to capture those moments and say, this is a conversation that I had with your grandfather. So they're able to see their grandfather in a different light.
Right.
And I think it's really important for us to do. Definitely have those conversations for our own benefit. But if we're able to record it and capture that moment forever, I think it definitely adds on to these conversations. It adds on to the conversations for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, to be able to see the kind of men that we were and the love that we share for one another. I think that'd be a great thing.
Yeah. I got to reach out to him, man. I know I got to do it and just, see how, if nothing else, see how he's doing. Right. Because I as an adult and as somebody who's self-aware, or, I call myself self-aware, aware of kind of like the struggles of a father. Like I know why he wasn't present. Right. Like I know his father wasn't in his life when he was young. I know that he was working overtime all the time. Like he was always at work. And so I know that when he came home, he was tired. And so he was resting or sleeping or whatever. Like I understand it all as an adult now. I didn't understand it as a kid. And so I know that those are parts of it, right? Those are pieces of why he wasn't present and available, maybe the way that I wanted or needed him to be at certain times. And so I've already excused that. And so that's why I think I haven't reached out, because I was like, I already understand. I know what's going on. There's no big deal. It's whatever. And that's just being lazy, right? Like I just need to go ahead and do it. Yeah. And the same reason I actually had my dad on the podcast, my actual father on the podcast, for the same reason. It's like there's parts of my life that I just lived through as a kid, and like I wanted to know his perspective on it, his take on it, and why he fathered me the way he fathered me, and learn about my grandfather, who was a big part of my young life before he passed away, but he was never a part of my dad's life like that. And so being able to talk to my dad and share with him my kid-like experiences with his dad that he didn't get was really like a really interesting conversation, right? Because he's looking at me talk about his dad with all this light and glory, and he didn't get to have that with his dad.
Yeah.
So that was a really interesting thing. He kind of emotional about it because he would have liked to have that or had that with his dad, and he never got a chance to.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
so
think
yeah,
that's one of the blessings of being a grandfather, right? Because now I have two granddaughters from my two oldest sons, right? And but that's the blessing of being a grandfather is you get the opportunity to make up for what you didn't do with your kids, and some of us take that opportunity, some of us don't. But it's a rare opportunity, and it also allows your kids to see you in a different light. Like you said, your
hmm
father didn't have that experience, but I'm sure that he values the fact that you were able to have that experience. You know what I mean? And so, in some kind of way, like you said, a little weird, but able to live those experiences vicariously through you because,
hmm
he was more attentive to you, more there for you than he was with your father. So, your father didn't experience it, but he's able to live it through you, through your experience, and even to at some point maybe was able to watch that dynamic of his father, interacting with you, in the ways that he didn't. So I think there's even healing in that too. But definitely as absent fathers, that's a blessing that we receive, whether we a gift, should I say, that we receive, whether we take it or not, accept it or not, which is to be able to be the father or the grandfather to our grandkids that we weren't to our children. And so I think that's a gift.
yeah, I agree. It's never too late, right? I mean, it's never too late until it's too late, right? And so we always have the opportunity to make a better decision, better choice, to do some things differently, and fatherhood is one of those things where like it's an infinite game, right? Like it's never ending. You are a father from now until eternity, right? Because once you accept that role, and you are given the title father, you're father forever. Like you're a father to your kids. And then even after you're gone, they're going to be saying my father, right? And after your kids are gone, your grandkids will be saying my father's father, or they'll be saying my great grandfather. They'll be talking about these people they never even met, because your legacy is there as a father. And for me, trying to continue to be a better father, and a better man, I definitely need to have those tougher conversations, and do some more work on myself to kind of continue to figure out who and what and how I can be as a father for my kids, right?
Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned a little bit earlier. Your father said, "Love your mother, but respect me." Is there any other things that you got from your father that you used in your parenting?
Um, a lot of things, right? And so I'm the oldest boy in the family, and so I have three brothers, so it's four of us all together. And we often joke when we watch each other and how we interact with our kids and the different ways we see our father in us. You know what I mean? Like the things that we do, and it's like, yeah, Dad used to do that. You know what I mean? And it's unconscious. Like we don't think about it, but it because he was such a uh, figure in our lives, we picked up these mannerisms as fathers now, where we're doing the same things that he did and not even recognizing it. And so my dad, definitely hardworking, definitely was big on education and going to school and taking pride in the outcomes of his children. And um, one of the things that means a lot to me is there are nine of us, right? We had nine kids. My mom and dad had nine kids. And my dad, during some of the hardships that he had, fell into depression and things like that. And he started to drink. And we had a lot of down times, you know what I'm saying? But through it all, he stayed, you know what I mean, with a
Mhm.
wife and nine kids, and struggled with us, And so there's a lot of fathers who bailed, there's a lot of fathers who bailed on one child, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But to not only to not bail, but stay, you know what I mean? And during his up times and his down times, he still stayed, and even up until after, my mom passed away a couple of years ago, and even the position that he plays now in our life, like he's still here. You know what I'm saying? He's still calling. There's still days when, myself or my brothers and sisters may call him and say, "Hey, Dad, I need this," or whatever, as adults, because we're all grown now. We're kids. You know what I mean? But there's still times we can call my dad and say, "Hey, Dad, I need this. Can you help me do this," or whatever. And he still, is there for us. And so that's one of the biggest things, man, just the fortitude and to be able to look and say, he didn't leave us. You know what I mean? And so no matter how hard things get, even in your own life, your own marriage, in the lives of your own children, that's one thing we can fall back on and say, yeah, but Dad didn't leave. And so if he didn't leave with 9 and I only got 1 biological, 5 altogether, if he can stay with 9, I can hang in with 5. You know what I'm saying? To remain that father figure to all 5 of my kids, if he could remain the father figure to all 9 of his, And so I think that's one of the biggest things that I took away from my dad, just staying, whatever that looks like, whatever that pocket looks like, the good, the bad, the ups and downs, but I can look over my shoulder and he's still there. You know what I mean? And as a child, and even in the lives of my sons and my daughter, they're all, again, young adults now trying to find their way, doing their own thing. But I know that they can look over their shoulder, and just knowing that I'm back there makes a difference and gives them, ammunition to keep moving forward. And so that's something I learned from my dad.
Yeah. That's dope. I mean, to have, and I always I appreciate the fact that, me and my dad have a great relationship, and he has a great relationship with my daughters. And I still feel like, even as a grown man, like something going on. Hey, Dad, hey, can I talk to you for a second? This is going on, that's going on. And, we live like 6 hours away, but if he was here, I'm pretty sure, like, yo, Dad, remember that time you made me paint the fence? Well, I need to paint the fence. Come on over. Let's get these paintbrushes moving. I still feel that, and it's really cool. And even my wife's father, he actually lives with us, and his relationship with my daughters is like, they're like best friends, and I cherish and I appreciate them for going beyond being a father and being great grandfathers, right? And trying to do some of the things that, and I see them doing this stuff, because I always tell my dad he's soft now, right? Because of the way he treats my daughters. And I see him trying to, like, he told me, like, he's like, look, I can't be with them like I was with you, because I'm different, right? He's like, I'm older and wiser and smarter, and some of the stuff I did with you, I did out of desperation, or I just did because I didn't know better. And he's like, when you know better, you do better. And so hopefully, I can do better by them now that I know what better is. And so I really appreciate that from my father, and I'm sure you appreciate the same. So you mentioned a little bit earlier at the beginning of the podcast, you're doing some outside of your own podcast, you're doing some other things as well, some speaking and some ebooks. What you got going on there? I'm interested to know.
I got several things going on. So I got the ebooks. The website is ebooksbyejames.com. So I made it real simple. Ebooksbyejames.com. I have 3 ebooks available right now. So the first one is called Males to Men, which deals with the transition from young men into manhood. You know what I mean? And so that's the first one. The second one is called The Core 4, which is the 4 core values that every daughter should receive from her father, right? And so it breaks down, at its core. And I think this is a book that's good for daughters and fathers, right? Because you're able to, at his minimum, as a father, as a minimum, what should I be giving to my daughter? What should I be instilling? What values should I be instilling in my daughter? And so that ebook kind of deals with those 4 core values. that you should be giving to your daughter and that your daughter should be looking to receive. And I think it's also important for when we go back, we're talking about the mothers who may be raising their daughters alone. And again, looking for those male figures to be father figures in the lives of their children that also gives them, okay, these are the 4 core values that he should have. And so when you're looking for the kind of man that you want to be father figure to your child, you have something to go off of to say, okay, does he check out 4 of these boxes? The last one is a book called Forgiving Me, The 4 Steps to Self-Forgiveness. And so one of the things that I've been blessed to be a part of this year is I was blessed to connect with an organization called the Forgiveness Mission. And you can find them at forgivenessmission.com. And what we started doing, we had a virtual workshop that's dealt with forgiveness at the beginning of the year. And it was really successful. And in the middle of us, after doing it, we're having a conversation and we're like, you know what, we need to do this more often. And so we started doing it every quarter. So now we're doing it 4 times a year, but we're having these conversations on forgiveness. What is forgiveness? What does it mean to forgive? Forgiveness of others, forgiveness of yourself, and forgiveness and wellness. How it affects you, affects your body to carry unforgiveness. And so we're having those conversations. So in the midst of that, one of the workshops that we were doing, a young lady asked, "Well, how do I begin to forgive myself? I'm in the space of forgiveness. Well, how do I do that?" And so in the midst of that explanation, what I told her was, look at the word self as an acronym. And so the S would stand for season of life. What season of life were you in when you made this decision that you're holding yourself accountable for now? The E would stand for the emotional state. What emotional state were you in when you did it? Right. So I always give the example about the time period in which my mom passed away. I was going through a deep depression and stuff in that time period. So my emotional state, I may have made some decisions that now, I may not be proud of. But if I take in consideration where I was emotionally at that time, then I can forgive myself. And so the L stands for limited information. Basically, sometimes we make decisions because we don't have all the facts. And then the F would simply be able to forgive yourself by giving yourself grace, by acknowledging that at that moment you were doing the best that you could, And so it dives a little bit more into that, but that's what it is. Forgiving Me, the 4 Steps to Self-Forgiveness. So those are the ebooks that's available. And then the other part is the speaking. So getting into the place where now I'm approaching schools to come in and speak to students. Organizations, whether it's teachers, conferences, or whatever, to be able to come into those spaces and give words of inspiration or to address whatever issues that they may be dealing with at that time, to be able to, again, to try to bring solutions like we do with the podcast, but now try to do it in person. So that's where I'm at. That's the trifold triangle of my business. The podcast, it's a public speaking and workshops. And then there's also the merchandise, whether it's the T-shirts, whether it's the ebooks or whatever that is, as far as merch. That's the triangle that I have for my business, all 3 points. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to step out there and be great, you know what I mean, and make a lasting impression on this reel.
Yeah. I definitely got to grab those ebooks, man. They sound like, like I said, I'm always trying to expand and grow as a father and as a man. And those sound like books that I need. So I'm definitely going to be heading over to ebooks by E. James for sure to get them. So I got I got 3 questions for you.
Okay.
This is a fatherhood podcast. Obviously, we've been talking about fatherhood and fathers and all that. But I haven't really asked you, and this is interesting because I ask this question in every episode, but I always seem to get different answers, and I have my own theory as to why. But I'm curious to know, what does fatherhood mean to you?
It's that journey. It's a journey that we're on, and it's kind of a journey of passing the baton, right? Because we are raised by our own fathers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's going from the person who's receiving fatherhood to the person who's becoming a father, and then the person who's now pouring into the next generation. And so it's that transition from son to father to dad. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so in that, I just believe that, you're always learning of what that means to be a father. And so as you're learning, you're passing that information that you're becoming to learn on to the next generation, so that even if it's just in your bloodline, the example of fatherhood will continue to get better and better and better with each generation. And so that's the way I see it. Taking the things that we learned, the things that was poured into us as sons, the things that's continued to be important to us as fathers, and taking those same things and pouring those lessons into our sons, so that we can get better with each generation.
Right. Okay. All right. So here's a second question, and actually it's kind of a two-part question. So you're getting into speaking now, right? So let's say we booked you for a gig. We have you come out, and we got a room full of people, right? Inside that room is all men. They're all fathers. What message would you want them to hear?
Show up and be still. You know what I mean? Regardless of what that looks like. And like I said, even in my own father's life, like I said, it was 9 of us. He could have easily bailed and just be like, hey, it's just me, but he didn't. And during those ups and downs, as a son, and as a father myself now, I appreciate that. You know what I mean? That no matter what, he didn't bail. He didn't leave us, no matter how hard it got. And so that would be my message that I have for fathers, man. Just show up, man, and be there, whatever it looks like, and sometimes you have to fight for that right. Maybe you and the mom is not on good terms or whatever that looks like. Well, you got to deal with it, and even with that, speaking from a place of my own personal experience, because when me and my daughter's mom got divorced, of course, there was some friction even with that. But it's like, what's the alternative? You know what I mean? Not being in my daughter's life, that's unacceptable. Because again, I only got one. My father had 9. You know what I'm saying? It's like, hey, whatever that details, whatever fight that I have to fight in order to stay and stand in that pocket, I got to do it. And so that's be my main message, man. Show up and stay. Whatever that means, just stay in the pocket. You know what I'm saying? And fulfill that void, fulfill that need, fulfill that responsibility that you have as a father. Just stay in there.
I like it, man. Show up, be still, stay in that pocket. I love it. All right. So we book you. I mean, that was you killed it on that one. So we book you again for a second time to come out and speak. A little bit smaller room, a little bit more intimate venue. You walk out on stage and there's only 5 people in the crowd. And those 5 people are your children. What's the message that you want them to hear?
First of all, I love you, right? So that has to be known up front, because as a father, you're not going to always agree with me, right? As a father, you're not always going to be able to see what I see, right? Because you're young and you're ambitious and you want to see what the world has to offer. Well, I can see that, some of the things that the world has to offer may not be in your best interest. And you might not be able to recognize that up front, And so knowing, number one, I love you. And number 2, I always have your best interest at heart, despite how that may make you feel.
Mm-hmm.
You might not like me at sometimes. It's okay. You might not agree with me at some time. That's okay too. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, you're going to know anything I said or did in your life, I did because I love you and I always have your best interest at heart. And I think that in the midst of that growing season, from those teenage years to probably when we're about 25 to 30, where we're still figuring things out and our kids are figuring things out on their own, that's that time period when, we all feel like we know.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I know what's best for me. I know what I want. Okay, cool. But I'm going to tell you what's right. I'm going to tell you, don't go down that street, whether you think that's the street you want to go anyway, and whether you listen to me and don't go down that street, or whether you go down that street and fall into a hole, that I'm there to pull you out of that hole, and you learn from that. Even if you go that way and you were able to avoid the hole, still understand and know that even though you went against what I told you to do or what I suggested that you do, I still have your best interest at heart, and I still love you. And you can always fall back on that, whether we're at a time where we're not talking, where we don't agree, where we're butting heads. No matter how the situation presently is going, that foundation will always be, I love you, and I have your best interest at heart. And so no matter what the ups and downs is, when the dust settles, that foundation is secure.
I love it, man. I love it. Look, bro, I really appreciate you taking the time to share with us because there's some really good stuff in here, man. I mean, you dropped some gems on us that I think that was really important to hear for everyone, for a father at every stage of the game, right? I think I haven't read them yet, but I think the ebooks are going to be invaluable to someone on their journey to being a better father. For a man, right? Becoming more of a man, because a lot of us were kind of raised to be men by men who weren't yet raised to be men. You know what I mean? And so there's always that room for growth and going from a boy to a man and embracing that challenge even later in life is difficult without guidance, right? And so I think everything that you're doing is super, super important, and I appreciate you for it. Not only that, but then also taking the time out of your day to come and share with us on this podcast, because, like I said, somebody is going to be touched by it. Somebody's going to hear these words and go out and be a better man, be a better father, be a better husband. Be a better employee, right? Because, rising tide raises all boats, and you become a better man, and all those other things are affected because of it. So again, thank you. I'm saying thank you for those that are listening, because they can't say thank you. But those of you that are listening, make sure you go and follow and listen to the podcast and go show your love and support. Speaking of, if they wanted to reach out to you, they want to find you, how would they go about doing that?
First of all, they can go to the website, because the website is up. The website is dealhealfulfill.org, right? So that's dealhealfulfill.org, and they can find me there. And when you go there, I have all the information as far as contact information. Also, it has the links to the ebooks and the t-shirt line, and the information about the podcast can all be found there. Outside of that, if you go to YouTube, on Facebook, TikTok, any social media, and you look up Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, you'll find me there. And so that's where I am. Very easy to find. I try to make it simple, because I lead with my mission. And again, my mission is to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with the problems, heal from the pain, and fulfill their purpose. And so with that, everything else was built around that. So it's Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, Deal to Heal tees for the t-shirts. Ebooks by E. James is a little different in the name, but the mission is still the same. And so, so if you just look up dealhealfulfill.org, you definitely can find me there. But as far as the podcast, Deal to Heal with E. James podcast on any social media, you should be able to find me there.
All right. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. I'll let you get back to your day. But again, thank you for sharing the time with us. I really, really sincerely appreciate it. And I look forward to grabbing those books and diving in. I'll let you know how they impacted and affect my life.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Again, let me say thank you, first of all, for being on the podcast, for being my guest, and then for also allowing me to grace your podcast and try to add value to the best of my ability to your listeners. And then again, I appreciate the work that you do, again, as fathers and just as men, to cultivate these areas and these spaces where we can come and learn from each other and be vulnerable with each other and grow together and know that it's okay to put our guards down, and be cool with each other. Then we put those capes back on and go out to make a difference in the lives of those who we interact with. But we always have to have these safe spaces. And so I appreciate you for providing a safe space for us to come together and to grow.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. All right, brother, I'm a sign off here, and then I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Be blessed.